Alright, we could do a few more of these. Let's do some favorite budget staples of mine for black. Now, Victimize is one that everybody kind of already knows. It's a little annoying sometimes because you have to have legal targets when you do this, but it's still a great budget option over things like Reanimate or Animate Dead. Another one that I've always liked is Thwart the Grave. Now, the mana cost seems a little bit scary with 6 mana, but oftentimes there's enough random creature types in a deck that can reduce the cost by at least 1. And usually there's enough random creature types where you're able to grab at least 2 things out of your graveyard. And it's only 4 cents. These are really easy to pick up. Another pet reanimation spell of mine is Blood for Bones. Kind of feels a little similar to Victimize, where you have to sacrifice a creature, but you get to return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield and then return another creature card from your graveyard to your hand. And note that nothing on this card says the word target on it. So the creature that you sacrifice to the spell could be returned to your hand or put onto the battlefield. And Archaeomancer is one of my favorite things to loop with this thing. Or even better, Scholar of the Ages is my favorite thing to reanimate onto the battlefield, because when Blood for Bones resolves, that gets to trigger and then returns this back into my hand. Even if your opponent were to pick off a few things out of your graveyard, since this doesn't target, and if your opponent still left some things in the graveyard, you can at least take those out of the graveyard. And this will run you for as cheap as 27 cents. Massacre Girl is one of my favorite board wipes in black. Usually there's enough 1/1 sitting around where it's just a complete board wipe. But also, because she's a creature, it's very easy to use her as a repeatable board wipe. It's great for hosing those Living Death players that have been setting up their graveyard all game. Massacre Girl is pretty cheap, sitting at 27 cents. Moving on to green, I love creatures that can ramp lands out of your deck onto the battlefield, and Zutina, Speaker of Tajuru, is one that I've recently been liking. It's basically a Farhaven elf, except it's a 2/2 and it has some upside. I feel like a lot of people didn't really pay attention to Jumpstart, so this only sits at 52 cents at this time. And another Jumpstart card that I think people missed out on is Primeval Herald, aka Baby Primetime, which we all know how strong this banned card is. Well, with Primeval Herald, instead of grabbing any kind of land, you could grab a basic land when it enters the battlefield. But it also does that on attacks, just like Primeval Titan does. The only thing is that it's only 1 land and that it has to be a basic land. But it's also a 3/1 with Trample. At the very least, 4 mana for 2 lands in 2 turns and a body, I think is a decent rate for 41 cents. Now, when it comes to card draw with green, there's a lot of good options out there. Garruk's Uprising is probably my favorite out of them. Everybody knows about this card. It's very cheap too. But a very similar card is Garruk's Pack Leader. I think a 4/4 is pretty decent stats, but 5 mana is kind of a lot. But if I'm building budget, 16 cents is way better than $2.43. I also used to run Keeper of Fables. Same deal, it's kind of expensive and you have to deal combat damage, which is kind of tricky. But if I'm trying to keep my deck under $25, then I think 21 cents is a great deal. Also for ramp, I think cards like Overgrowth is underrated. Enchantments are typically harder to remove than things like creatures, and you can activate this immediately if you attach it to an untapped land. Unlike something like Warm Power Stone, where it adds only colorless mana and it enters tapped. But for the same reason, I think Wild Growth is also very underrated. For the same price of Llanowar Elves, you get the same return, and you can even activate it on the same turn that you cast it if you put it on an untapped land. Cheapest copy of Overgrowth will run you 25 cents, and for Wild Growth, 26 cents. And that's all I'm going to talk about in this